Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Today, we will be speaking to Larry Alex Taunton, a award-winning author, columnist, producer, multiple books authored, The Grace Effect and The Faith of Christopher Hitchens. He writes regularly for major publications, featured in the New York Times, the Times of London, Wall Street Journal. You can follow him at Larry Taunton, TAUNTON.com, and on X, Larry Taunton. There we are. There he is. He's got a lot to say. We're going to talk a little bit about the Fauci pardons and the WEFers, the World Economic Forum participants. Also, we're going to have Alex Marlow towards the bottom of the hour. He is, of course, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News Network, New York Times bestselling author, Breaking the News, and then Breaking Biden, another book at age 21, first employee of Andrew Breitbart's media network. Got a lot to get into this new day, new administration, and new year. A lot of things happening. You're going to hear it here. Stay with us.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
As I said, you can find Larry Taunton at larrytaunton.com. Also on X, LarryAlexTaunton.com, beg your pardon. He is presently in Lucerne, or at least overlooking Lake Lucerne. He is a keen observer of the World Economic Forum, and he has a lot to say. Let's get right to it. Larry, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Drew.
So I almost don't know where to start here. Oh, I forgot to mention your podcast, which is Ideas Have Consequences. And you were telling me that in that podcast, one of your sort of techniques is to dig into the policymakers, what's being floated on the culture, and then dig into how that then actually affects people on the ground.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, particularly since the pandemic, Drew, is that there's a class of people, I won't call them elites, that's a compliment to them, they are elitists, who are insulated from their own ideas. They're insulated from the policies they would make, the policies they promote. And, just by way of example, today I just happened to be, I was in Davos, this is day 2 of the World Economic Forum. And as you're walking along, they're all in these gas-guzzling SUVs and luxury sedans. And I want to be clear, I personally like gas-guzzling SUVs and luxury sedans, but I don't go around the world lecturing people on their carbon footprint. And that's what these people do. They fly in their private jets, and Drew, they can't be bothered to take a luxury sedan from the airport into Davos. They helicopter in and then get into their luxury sedans. And I didn't see anybody eating bugs today. In fact, I saw quite a lot of beef being consumed.
And does anybody ever bring this to their attention or confront them about it? And I wonder what their reaction is or has been.
Well, interestingly, there have been those who have pointed this out to individuals, for instance, like, say, a Bill Gates, who is a member of the World Economic Forum. But their response is what you would expect it to be. These are individuals who are extraordinary. I mean, you've met them, I've met them. These are people who are extraordinarily arrogant, and they think that they are an exemption to all the rules that they would like to force down on the rest of us.
I have noticed that is generally a conceit of people that are big fans of centralized governments. I've really I'm not a political scientist, but I've been watching things rather carefully these last 5 years, and I've noticed there is definitely people that feel as though people are generally bad, and they can only be rendered toward the good by a omnipotent, kind, incredibly wise, centralized authority. And then there's people like me who believe that people are generally pretty good. And as soon as you centralize anything, you screw that up.
Yeah, well, I think that's well put. These are individuals who, worship the state. And the way that I like to put it in a way that maybe makes sense to regular people who don't, spend their lives hanging out with people like this, is the average person is of a conservative mindset, which is kind of what you've described just a moment ago. And those are people who get up in the morning and they get a cup of coffee and they begin to think about their day. These are individuals who get up in the morning, they get a cup of coffee, and they begin thinking about your day too. They want to think about your day. And it's because they can't tolerate the idea that somebody somewhere is doing something that they don't like. It's the way they think.
But it's not even they don't like. It's like the part of that centralized sort of, I don't have a good word. That centralized authority is one of the conceits of it is that they'll be the one in charge. They'll be there sitting in the driver's seat, as opposed to just, they wouldn't ever imagine they would be one of us. And it's really rather disgusting. And doesn't history teach them that this really never works? How come they can't learn from history? And by the way, how come they don't know that they're and by the way, they're the trail of monstrous I've got to choose my words carefully. Monstrous behavior in the name of revolutionary movements, whether it's the Jacobins or Mao, they don't take a good look at that and they kind of think maybe it wasn't always such a great idea. And by the way, this highly centralized administrative state that they love so much was invented by Louis XIV. And the Jacobins were the one that decided that the people should be running Louis's bureaucracy. But the bureaucracy was always the problem. It was the bureaucracy itself was the problem.
Well, it's interesting, Drew. I was trained as a historian, and specifically of European history with a concentration in Russian history. And what you find when you study revolutionaries like the Jacobins, or let's say the Bolsheviks, or let's say the modern Democrat Party, is that they have no regard for history. And having read, for instance, the books, all of the books, of Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and sole chairman of the World Economic Forum, I came away from reading those books going, you know what? He's a technocrat. He's a technocrat. He thinks like and is trained like an engineer, and all of his language is like that. We will build the state, this kind of language. But you get the feeling that no, they don't know history. They have no regard for history, and that's part of their arrogance.
Yeah, I mean, whether you talk about Adam Smith or whether you talk about a patient and a doctor making decisions together, it's always that distributed responsibility, it's the magic of distributive systems that always works to the benefit of human beings. It always, yes, it needs some regulation. Yes, it needs some centralization here and there. But to put your faith in centralization, I mean, didn't we learn anything from COVID? Didn't that teach us how people who run to these sort of totalitarian instincts and people who like to report their neighbors for having barbecues during COVID, these are the prison guards from 1939. That's who they are. And the centralized authorities are the people that brought us things like that. We just lived through it. It wasn't very pleasant. Do you still think it's a good idea?
Well, interestingly enough, Drew, to your point, let's just take socialism, Marxism, communism, its various manifestations. Those regimes killed more than 150 million people in the 20th century alone. Now, that's more than all religious wars from all previous centuries combined. And yet, we still find in places like Davos and Portland and DC and in Gavin Newsom's California, which I think you're familiar with, people who think, you know what,
God.
You just need some tweaking. It can still work.
No, they didn't do it right. I know how to do it right. Or this, it's like the classic statement about markets. This time it will be different. This time it's different. No, it's never different. It's always the same. Well, let's flip over. I want to get back to them at some point, but let's flip over to the pardons from the recently departing administration. And we have Dr. Fauci being pardoned for something he allegedly didn't do. So this whole notion of pardons for people that don't need pardons, by the way, and it was, I'm blanking on the name of the congressman who's now a senator here from California. He was my congressman, and I wasn't happy with him. Anyway, he said you can't pardon somebody who's not guilty, or you wouldn't accept a pardon if you weren't guilty. Well, a lot of people are accepting pardons that must be guilty, I guess. No, it's Schiff, Alan Schiff.
Adam Schiff.
Oh, yeah.
Adam Schiff. Yes. Well, I mean, this really gets at the core of how corrupt they are. Now, media, of course, is drawing attention away from this because they're obsessed with Elon Musk and his alleged, Nazi salute, which is completely ridiculous. But this goes to show us how media works as the propaganda arm of the global left, in this case, specifically of the Democrat Party. They are drawing attention away from what Biden has done. And not only that, but he pardoned members of his own family. I mean, it just sort of underscores just how utterly corrupt this particular administration was.
Why is that not more obvious? Why aren't journalists doing the job that I thought they were supposed to do? It'd be investigating excesses of power, particularly, if not just investigating things that make you go, huh?
I think media has taken the view, and I'm speculating here, Drew, but those people that I know in media, and I used to do, for instance, at some time, quite a lot of work for, let's say, CNN. I would be kind of the token conservative that perhaps they would come in. I mean, at least they pretended to be, a marketplace of ideas. Now they don't even pretend that anymore. Now my phone doesn't ring for things like that anymore. They've canceled anybody who simply doesn't agree with them. And I think it's because they've decided that the end justifies the means. They're willing to do absolutely anything to acquire power and maintain it. So I think that's a major reason that we're seeing what we're seeing in media.
Looking at the sweep of the last 8 years, I guess, it feels like, because I'm super moderate, I worry about excesses of the incoming administration. I worry about certainly the excesses of the one that's left. And it has felt to me like we've been in a mass formation. We've been in a delusional state, and clearly it hit an apex during COVID. I mean, that you could easily just isolate the COVID experience as a mass formation. But as I look at the sweep of the last 8 years, it's beginning to me to look like it's all kind of a Trump derangement, delusional, preoccupation, and that there was so much relief when they pushed him out of office that on the heels of that relief, that the devil now was out, the Russian operative was out of the Oval Office. That relief gave them some sort of momentum that was just out of control. And so I don't think they thought about so much centralizing and what their specific, I'm sure plenty of people did, but I'm not sure that's what was motivating them. But to me, the delusion that had, the distorted thinking that had sort of been constantly present, and certainly present in the media for now the last 8 years, has been nothing short of astonishing. Even just look at what you mentioned, the Nazi salute by Musk. Do you know what he was doing when he made that salute? He was saying, "My heart goes out to you. My heart goes out."
Yes, exactly.
So everybody, call me, get me doing that now. Put me on the Nazi salute edited little video, and I'm saying, "My heart goes out to you." You can't even say "my heart goes out." Well, there it is. But that's delusional thinking. That's really disturbed thinking. And you could say it's motivated and it's trying to do, but I think they're really in a delusional state. I really do.
I think, let's go back to where I am. I'm in Switzerland. Yeah. I was just spent all day among a bunch of globalist scumbags at Davos, where, to give you some idea of the influence that is present at Davos, last year. I haven't seen the figure for this year. It would be a little lower because many of them have gone to D.C. to kiss up to Trump. But last year, there were 50 heads of state here, more than 115 billionaires, more than 600 CEOs of major corporations that were here, and they're all gathered in Davos. Now, if you were to come and hang out with me, Drew, now you're much more famous than I am, so we would need to maybe put a fake beard on you, a fake nose or something on you. But then we go wander around Davos, the two of us, and we just pop into buildings and we sit down and we listen, just like we're one of them. This is what I do. So you have, for instance, Rebel News and others who are there, and I can appreciate their approach because they're getting these people when they're coming out and kind of harassing them on their way to the cars, and they've got camera crew. Me, I just pretend to be a weffer, and I just go and I sit in and I just kind of listen. And the result is that people, because they're so arrogant, they never ask you questions about yourself, and they can't resist telling you how important they are. And the result is that they begin to tell you their global agenda. And you come away thinking to yourself, and the point I'm trying to make here is, and when we're talking about the Democrat Party, it's represented by this same kind of thinking that's so arrogant that they have nothing but contempt for democracy. They have nothing but contempt for populism, which is just simply a grassroots movement of the people. But for them, that's beneath them. Those are the hairy, unwashed masses. That's fascism. And these are individuals who, in many ways, the remarkable thing when we're talking about Elon Musk's alleged, Nazi salute, these are individuals who have been the embodiment of actual fascism, meaning the strict regimentation of corporations for war against domestic populations. This is what they've been doing. That's what ESG is. That's what DEI is. This is what they've been doing with crushing free speech, all of these kind of things. But then they turn around and they say, no, we love freedom. It's Elon Musk who's the Nazi.
What kind of speeches have you heard?
Well, some amazing ones. But, much of the WEF is online. 70% of it is online. So I don't know that people would need me to be there to dissect that for them. What is more interesting is to move among the 2,700 other people who attend. They're the rank and file who will, in some sense, seek to enact, mobilize these particular policies and so on that are being suggested. And what you hear are things like the need to bring down the global population from, let's say, 8 billion to less than 2 billion. I mean, they say these things. You hear them talking about, the carbon footprint. You talk about them hearing, and this is a word, Drew, that you can give to your audience. It is the new final solution. That phrase wasn't known in the West until Nuremberg. And then they were going like, what? You guys keep talking about, final solution. You're talking about the annihilation of European Jews. Well, the new final solution is sustainability. That word is freighted with all kinds of anti-human meaning, and whatever comes behind it is not good. So they'll talk about population sustainability, agricultural sustainability, economic sustainability. In my hotel room, there's something there about, do I want my towels washed? And it speaks of, environmental sustainability, these kinds of things. And this is what they talk about there. And you have to listen carefully about what they're promoting and what they're pushing, but it's fundamentally anti-human.
Are you an enthusiast for the our stepping away from the World Health Organization?
100%. But you would know a lot more about that than I would.
Well, it's hard. The treaty that they attempted to foist on everybody was absolutely insane. But the way they intercalate into the system is very pernicious. It's very difficult to follow. I was, for instance, looking at the vaccine schedule recently for children. I was thinking, why it's 72? It's a lot. And the first thing you come upon is the first day of life. The World Health Organization mandates hepatitis B vaccine. And I thought, well, that's insane. I was involved in the research on hepatitis B back in the early 80s, and we were concerned with maternal fetal transmission in China because they had it commonly. We never have it in this country. There are 1,200 cases of hepatitis B in this country, and it's all in IV drug users. And you don't think those women are tested for hepatitis B? And if they are positive, then that baby for sure gets the vaccine. You don't think that's how it goes in this country? Instead, in the name of World Health Organization and equity, every child born in this country, immediately upon exiting the birth canal, must get this vaccine. That is wild to me. That this organization from, I guess they're over there now, they're involved with all this, aren't they? In Davos, from very far from us, are mandating our infants without physicians really understanding where it came from or why it's being mandated. It's just, and to question it, you are some sort of pariah. We got a problem here.
Yeah, and I think that that treaty that, as you put it, they want to foist on everyone was an attempt to erode our national sovereignty. It was an attempt to give the WHO increased power in the United States. And something that I've loved that Trump has done, and hence, by the way, I'll throw this out to you, Drew, it'll encourage you. This is my third year in a row at the WEF, at the World Economic Forum. And this is the first year that I sense panic. And that is because they know that Trump is not merely not on board with globalism, but he's a fierce anti-globalist. And he, not within the first day, but within hours, was sending the very strong message that there's a new sheriff in town and he's nothing like the old, demented, corrupt previous sheriff. And things are going to be very different. And you can feel that vibe in Davos. In fact, Trump wasn't at the WEF today, but it felt like he was there. You know, his presence, the Trump effect, is sending ripples through the World Economic Forum. And frankly, I love it.
Are we going to be able to sort of blow the lid off, so to speak, of what's going on over there to get people to kind of look at things anew?
Well, I think with people like you very kindly having me on your show and bringing some attention to this, I think people are, I was discussing this earlier today with a friend. I think just a few years ago, almost no one knew anything about the World Economic Forum. But as you point out, since the pandemic, I think that's changed. I think people are now looking to shows like yours. They're looking to alternative media. They no longer just accept what's being told to them by their media. They're trying to do some of their own research, and they're much more locked in to what is happening at the World Economic Forum. So that in my case, with my own, very limited fan base and my Twitter following, they are very keyed in following what I'm doing over there. They want to know. They want me to post video. They want me to post interviews. They want me to post my opinion about what's taking place there. And hence the reason that I'm here for the third year in a row.
Didn't Musk show up last year? Wasn't he there?
I don't think he was here last year, but he has been here before. Javier Milei was really the anti-globalist star who came last year and kind of lectured the WEF on why they're wrong about pretty much everything. And I believe he's going to be here again this year. And I think the WEF likes to do that because, I was talking about, how CNN used to like to have, the token conservative. Well, the WEF is very similar. For the most part, their speakers, the people that they feature, are all on board with globalism, but they want to give the appearance that, yes, we're listening. So let's have a Jewish rabbi speak, and let's have, some sort of anti-globalist come. But that's just to try to give the appearance that they're fair-minded when they're not.
Is there anything that can be done other than sort of tending to our own garden?
Well, I think we continue to bring attention to this, talking about what's happening here. Again, the population agenda is very, very real. I mean, their founding documents are all about that. One of their agenda contributors, Dr. Dennis Meadows, is a guy, you can find him on YouTube. In other words, you don't have to accept what I say on ideas have consequences. We go straight to what these guys themselves say. And they use language, Drew, that they don't use words like we need to kill people or human beings. They talk about sustainability. We need to create population sustainability. And when they talk about that, they say very openly that the Earth's population has exceeded its carrying capacity, and we need to reduce it by, a casual 6 or 7 billion people. I think people are waking up to that. I also think we have to hold our own politicians accountable and make them toe the line. Most of these globalists, they have been told to ignore their constituencies. I don't think we let them ignore their constituencies. And I think the American people decided they weren't going to let the Biden administration ignore them. And they spoke decisively in November.
What is the final solution? What, are they just trying to bring down the birth rate, or is it something more sinister?
Well, all of this comes out, Drew. You may recall a book, I remember having to look at it when I was in college or graduate school, called The Population Explosion, that was published, Paul Ehrlich, in 1968. It was a massive bestseller, and it affected governments around the world. And this was a guy who was saying that within the next 10 years, so by the mid-70s, billions of people were going to die around the world. And Kennedy was,
I was there. I was part of the ecology movement in the mid 70s, and there was going to be, first of all, we had a global ice age coming. Secondly, acid rain was going to destroy agriculture in this country. Thirdly, these are just some of our positions. Thirdly, there would be no oil in about 4 years. Fourthly, there would be famine worldwide because we had outstripped the ability to provide food for the world. Guaranteed, billions are going to die in famine, period, end of story. It begged no conversation. We just did the math, that was that. And the one thing that all these people, having been a part of it, never take into account is human ingenuity, the ability of human beings to solve problems when they're presented with them. That is not, they are in some sort of world of steady state where the present moment defines everything in the future. And it's never the case.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, Ehrlich's population explosion has been debunked many times over since its publication in 68, but its influence was massive, so that the Club of Rome, some of your listeners will be familiar with that, issued a paper, a white paper. It wasn't a publication for the general public, but sent to various thinkers in 1970, called The Predicament of Mankind. And out of that came the founding of the World Economic Forum in 1971. Oh, wow. And Dennis Meadows wrote a book that was, sold, or they gave away, 30 million copies, called Limits to Growth. And again, the focus was on population. And you would think that by now they would have let that go. Kind of your point earlier. I mean, why wouldn't somebody see this doesn't work? I mean, Musk himself tweets about this frequently, that in fact we're facing population collapse in many parts of the world, but they maintain this doggedly. And so at the end of the day, it feels to me, Drew, like really what they've created is a kind of neo-paganism. And you can kind of feel it in Davos. It feels like there's this kind of weird kind of earth worship that kind of goes on there. And so it's hard to hold my tongue, but I just kind of sit in the meetings and I listen and I ask questions and try not to out myself.
Well, I get the seductive quality of all that. I think some of the most interesting people are people that change their opinions, and that would be me, one of them, as it pertains to this experience. And I think it's worthwhile talking to people that were enthusiasts during the 70s, because we knew it all. We knew it all. And in the 70s, the present moment is exactly like the 70s in terms of all the excesses of the last 10 years. I can't believe we did this again, but here we are doing it again. And it eventually got taken over by good ideas and enthusiasm and people raising families and doing their work and doing good work and all the things that humans thrive. Humans just at their best moving forward. And then we hit it again now for some reason, but I don't know, keeps happening. But let me, before we wrap up, did you ever interview Rob Henderson and his notion of luxury ideas?
I have not.
Are you familiar with his notion?
I really am not familiar with him. Why don't you tell me a bit about him?
He's a sociology. He was a troubled kid growing up in a economically distressed part of California. He eventually found his way. He's got an interesting story. He wrote a book about it, and it's going to be a movie. He eventually found his way into the military. Military got him to straighten out, amazingly, as a result of the military collegiate. It's got a name. The military, veterans. What's it called? The veterans. Anyway, they've got a way for veterans to be able to go straight to college and be paid for. He got into Yale. He comes to Yale and he starts GI Bill. He starts studying sociology, and the first thing that strikes him is how these kids have these ideas about him, about his community and his world, and they have no idea what they're talking about. And then he ended up going to Oxford or Cambridge and became a decorated PhD sociologist and actually a social psychologist. And he writes about these luxury ideas all the time, that the people that have these ideologies, like the people in the World Economic Forum, are not people like him who've lived like that and who understand those communities, go back to those communities. And you were saying that's something you like doing, is going into the communities, going to the ground level where these policies are having their effect.
Yeah, well, let me give you a perfect example of what you're talking about. Last year, I decided that I was going to go to Poland and interview some of the refugees they were pouring into Ukraine. Now, I've been into Ukraine many times. I've written a book about child trafficking, human trafficking in that country. I've also been in Russia many times. So here I am. I've been there, and unrelated, I go to the World Economic Forum, and one of the meetings that I sneak into is with former British Prime Minister Theresa May, talking about all the wonderful things they're doing for Ukrainian refugees that are pouring into Poland. So I raised my hand and I find myself talking to her, and I said, have you been there? Because I may be the only person who's actually in this room who's actually been to Poland and seen these refugees. And you know what they're saying? No one is doing anything for them. And certainly not the World Economic Forum. And what's funny, if I were to show you the pictures, Drew, the first photo shows her greeting me with a big smile, and the progression of her smile disappearing from her face as I'm pressing her on these questions. But the point is, it's all this idealistic talk, a luxury idea, that the fact of the matter is, they don't care about these people, and they're not affected by their own ideas.
That's right. It's really disgusts me. Another, I'm going to let you go in a few minutes, but a really interesting wrinkle of European history I want to share with you that I ran straight on into as it pertains to my own family's heritage. I don't know if you know this. I found it just kind of interesting. So I was always raised that I was Russian descent, Russian. And then years later, I start looking at, you get 23andMe and you get, Ancestry.com. Lo and behold, Ukrainian. Ukrainian and Belarusian. And I thought, oh, that's odd. And there was a huge diaspora at the early part of the 20th century of Jewish, Ukrainian, and Belarusian citizens from Russia. And I used to hear from my grandmother that the bandits would come through, and she didn't know if those were the Tsarists, the Mensheviks, the Bolsheviks, or just some random criminals. They were just all these people running through their communities. And I met a Ukrainian woman a couple of weeks ago who was of Jewish descent, and I said, I just found out that I'm Ukrainian, and I was always told I was Russian. Isn't that kind of interesting? And she goes, no, you were. The reason they told you that is because you weren't Ukrainian. Jews are not allowed to be Ukrainian citizens. They are a separate, what do they call it, ethnicity living in Ukraine, but they're not given citizenship. So during the Soviet Union, you would have been Russian, but nothing to do with Ukraine. And once Ukraine stepped in, they've sent them back to this status of living amongst Ukrainians. Interesting, right?
Yeah, so, well, that history, a fascinating history, is covered in the very famous musical-made movie, Fiddler on the Roof. And so it wasn't just in Ukraine, it was in Russia that there was this mass migration. And of course, many of them ended up coming to the United States, and we're all the richer for it to have you here. Well, you're not here. I'm in Switzerland.
And it was, and I know it was work to get in. They all had to go through Montreal and then came to Rhode Island and then they ended up in Chicago and New York, most of them. And they needed sponsors and they needed to prove that they can make a living. It took years to get through the process, but they were running away from something not good. Michael Malice has written a book called The White Pill about the Potemkin villages and the Holodomor and all the horrors that happened in the Ukraine. And these guys seem to have gotten out just in time, my family amongst them. Larry, I appreciate you being here. Keep up the good work. I hope you'll come back and report in again soon, and we'll look for the podcast. Ideas have consequences, as they certainly do. And Larry Alex Taunton can be found on Twitter and also LarryAlexTaunton.com. Larry, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Drew. Thank you for having me.
And we are going to visit next with... from the Breitbart organization, we have Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart and the Breitbart News Network, also New York Times bestselling author. His book is Breaking the News and Breaking Biden. We'll talk we'll see his opinion about Dr. Fauci and the pardons and the family pardons and all the things that have been going on in the departing administration right after this. Wellness company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/CWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15. Pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
That's brilliant. And thank you, Drew. Where's Dr. Drew? Where is he? Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew.
And we're learning a lot about food quality. It's sort of the golden age. A lot of talk of the golden age these days, but a lot of the golden age of food and how it affects our health and wellness. Our sponsorship with Paleo Valley has been an integral part of the journey. Along with the way, we've discovered something else about our 2 favorite items, which is, as you know, the grass-fed finished beef bone broth, powdered protein powder, and the meat sticks. Those are my 2 favorites. Those are Susan's as well. They are nutrient-dense, not to mention impeccably sourced. They are essential to have in the event of emergencies. You don't think about that, but during the fires, we were glad to have that all on hand. We are used to using it in travel, but from travel to stocking the pantry or packing your to-go bag, they are low in calories. They will not disrupt your dietary regimen if you're on the run and concerned about dietary consumption, but it's nutrient dense. Excellent products. Go to doctor.com/PaleoValley. For first time, you'll get 15% off. Subscribers, saves you 20%. Again, that's drdrew.com/PaleoValley. Save money, be prepared. Our next guest is Alex Marlow. Caleb, I assume Alex is here. You've not notified me yet. He is the editor-in-chief, editor-in-chief of the Breitbart News Network, New York Times bestselling author. The Alex Marlow Show is where you should go. You can find it you can find him at Alex Marlow, no E in Marlow, Breitbart.com, alexmarlow.com. Alex, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Dr. Drew, means a lot to be here with you. I've been listening to you since I was in middle school. I'm a Los Angelino. I turned 39 this week, so it's been a long time, and I don't think we've ever met, so it's nice to be acquainted.
It is nice to be acquainted. A little young middle school, but okay. And,
I went to Walter Reed. I'm sure you know about it. So it's Corolla went there. So it's a lot of precocious kids there getting into a lot of trouble. So a lot of accelerated.
There was the opposite of precociousness when he was there. I would say it was more like sort of a jail meets some sort of work camp. What he tells me.
Hey, that's where I learned if you see a gun, turn it in. I mean, that's where I learned that expression. So it's important.
My God. So I just wanted to say I had the great good fortune of meeting Breitbart on my HLN program just before he passed away. And he sort of seemed like the greatest guy, the smartest guy. And he said, we got to get together. I'm going to show you what's happening here and what's going to happen in this country. And I got a lot of thoughts because, obviously on a CNN HLN interview, you've got your 4 minutes or 7 minutes and that's it. And I was looking so forward to getting to know him. And Andrew just left us prematurely.
We really all missed out. He was a true genius and a visionary, and I've been very lucky in my line of work. I've been editor-in-chief of Breitbart for 11 years, so I've gotten to know a lot of really special people, and he was truly unique. His vision for the culture was, bar none, the greatest, and he is the founder of this whole new media moment that we're in, where we're talking about citizen journalism. Yeah. That was Andrew's mantra. Andrew lived for a moment where the culture was dominated by conservative America First people, and he would have loved this moment right now because it's finally happened, Dr. Drew. I mean, I've been tracking this from LA my whole life. We finally just crested over that hill, I think, within the last few months, and Andrew would be thriving right now, and he's deeply, deeply missed.
It is an interesting time. I want to talk a little bit about the pardons that the previous administration issued on their way out the door. Let's start with Dr. Fauci. Any thoughts about him?
Yeah, it's open and shut. He's a criminal. He covered up the funding of the Wuhan lab that he had done, and he was asked about it under oath, and he lied about it. That's called criminality. That's illegal, and that's why he got the pardon. There's a lot of stuff Fauci got wrong. On a personal level, I think the lockdowns were the most offensive because they were anti-science and they led to a lot of depression. And I know your expertise in addiction medicine, a lot of relapses for people, a lot of people getting depressed, a lot of people who are not with us anymore because of how bad those lockdowns were. And he misled us on why they were necessary. They weren't necessary. He lied to us about the masks. All that stuff is offensive. But he did do something blatantly illegal, which is funding that Wuhan lab and then lying about it to Congress. And that's why he needed the pardon.
And is there any thought that some of his other activity in terms of covert funding or sort of engineering the complex that brings us gain of function, is there any culpability there that people are sort of ruminating about?
Yeah, of course. And that's why you need some sort of a blanket pardon. It goes back years before the pandemic. Yeah. And it's so that we don't dig too much and that we're discouraged from digging. And I don't know if that should be the case. I think Trump and his team if they have any bandwidth, they should investigate, because we should at least know for the historical record all that he did wrong. But it's one of these things where there was almost no oversight. He was such a powerful person. It's funny because my wife's a physician, and there was a Fauci textbook that is just handed out to medical students. So it was always in our bedroom. I knew his name so well from that textbook. And then all of a sudden he's on our TV lying to us nonstop about the greatest health crisis of our lifetime, and getting everything wrong every step of the way. And the fact that he can just ride off into the sunset with a $400,000 a year pension is another act of criminality, in my view.
Yeah, his story is sad. He was always kind of one of my, much like your wife having his book, I was very affected by him in a positive way during the AIDS epidemic, and that he was very, I know people have been critical of some of his strategies then too, but I'm going to tell you, there was a very dark, horrible, 100% fatality, not 1% fatality, 100% fatality. And he was very good at leading us through that and getting us to the point where we could do something, and then do something a little more. And then finally, in an extraordinarily short period of time, this 100% fatal illness became something chronic that people could live with their whole life. I mean, it took us 2,000 years to figure out syphilis. The fact that this was all done in 15 years is unprecedented. And he was at the helm during that. So when this pandemic broke out, I kept saying, when people cut out of everything I said, and they cut this one thing out, I kept saying, just listen to Fauci, just listen to the CDC, they'll get us through this. And that was the thing that I said repeatedly that I got categorically wrong. They were the wrong people to listen to in this situation.
Sure. And it's important to speak to this because I have an extreme view on his criminality. I think it's a black and white issue. But I agree with you that I asked my wife, I turned to her and I said, what's going on? She was a frontline doctor at the time, as were so many. And what do you think of this guy? And she said, well, he's on my textbooks. I've never heard anything bad about him. He did great work during the AIDS pandemic. So let's see what he's got to say. But it shows you, and I spent 8 years living in Washington, that the deep state is real. And all of these complexes where people, in order to maintain face at cocktail parties and to make sure that they have the ability to sit on very lucrative boards, they will go along to get along. They will protect their friends. You really wish it wasn't true. You wish it was some sort of conspiracy you saw online. But when you live there in Washington for long enough, it becomes clear it's a very corrupting environment. And that's why when Trump is talking about draining the swamp, it's not just people who want us into too many foreign wars, which of course is true, but it's also this consultancy class, this oligarchy that's leading us. And that's why there's so many mistakes made, I think, in the public health sector, is just because there's not many people bucking the status quo. And I think that Fauci was probably a good doctor and a good guy that had just gotten corrupted by 40 plus years in Washington.
That's kind of what my take was. That's kind of what I was thinking too. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it sort of explains to me how it could have gone so off the rail. One of the things I've been worried about now is I want to get to the truth. Then I want people to take action to make sure shit like this never happens again. And my fear is by going after people for criminal transgressions, everyone's going to become defensive, and it's going to go into some rabbit hole from which things never emerge, or at least the truth never emerges. So to me, this pardon is not that disturbing to me. And it's interesting that Rand Paul, on the heels of it, said, now this is outrageous, and it's motivating me to make sure we get to the truth. So I'm like, okay, well, you're good. If this is what it takes, that's all I really care about here.
Yeah, I've been working this through myself because I want to see the bad guys held accountable on an individual level, because I feel like I've got a sense of justice, and this is not just. But I also have an eye on the future. That's why I run the newsroom at Breitbart News. I'm always looking at what's coming next, and spending too much time dwelling in the past is generally not that helpful. We should be looking at what good can we do today. And so I'm like you, I'm torn on this. I would love for accountability to happen, but there is a silver lining if you're disappointed in these things. If we just take that energy that would have been spent investigating people who can't do us any harm anymore and we look forward, I think that's fine too. So I could kind of go either way.
You're making me feel better about my opinion, at least. And I also, my understanding is that there could still be civil cases issued against him, and the states have some wiggle rooms. There still could be something that happens. But you said something interesting just now. You focus on what's coming next. What's coming next? What are you worried about?
Well, what am I worried about? Well, I'm worried about, so from my angle, so editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, what I have to do is I have to be the keeper of the flame of the America First movement. We were the original outlet at Breitbart to understand Trump and not just support him on a blanket level, which of course we're huge fans of his in general, but to understand where he was coming from, that his contempt for the media, that his contempt for the open border, that his contempt for the military industrial complex, that all these were really excellent ideas. And his general skepticism of the way things have been done in Washington, that he said he'd never slept in Washington, I think, until he'd become president. He'd been there like 17 days in his life, stuff like that. We found that to be not a joke, but to be deadly serious. And I want to make sure he stays clear-eyed on that stuff. Thus far, if you look at the slate of executive orders he's done in the first day and a half, they've been superlative. They've been, every one of them, knocking them out of the park, making the Mexican cartels designate them terrorist organizations, securing the border, ending all the DEI stuff within the federal government. He should go further. He should ban it completely. All that stuff is bread and butter, and it's exactly what we want. Putting people on notice to do tariffs. We got rolled by NAFTA. He need to rip it up and start over. I think that's great. A lot of Republicans and conservatives got that wrong. But I will say that when he does stuff like leaving TikTok in place I'm very skeptical of the Chinese government, which runs TikTok. I don't want them getting that data from Americans while they're distracting us and keeping us away from doing productive stuff because we're hooked on our phones. So I don't like that. So, and I'm going to be the one who's going to say it. We're going to say it in a polite way, so not to alienate anyone. But that's our role, and that's what I'm looking at.
Are you worried about some of these EOs being tied up with the courts?
Yeah, of course, always. But, he's so many of them that I think most of them will get through. And a lot of it is a cultural thing. I'm playing a very long game. And so we're not going to get everything we want. We learned that the hard way the first time around, where he was just at every turn, everything he tried to do. Dr. Drew, recall when we had to shut down the government for a record amount of time because he wanted $5 billion for the wall, $5 billion out of a multi-trillion-dollar budget. They wouldn't give it to him. We had to shut down the whole government over it. So we know there's going to be a lot of opposition. We're used to it. We're battle-hardened. And we're already gotten more in the last 2 days than I honestly think we got in the first 4 years. So I'm pretty thrilled at the moment.
Any predictions about the cabinet positions? Is
I think
everybody going to get in?
Going well. Yeah, my main beef here is actually with the Democrats, that they're holding up the appointments because a lot of them are already done. We already know Pete Hegseth has 50 votes in the Republican side. So there's no reason not to just vote on him and get him through and move on to the next person, because there's going to be a couple that are going to take some debate. I'm talking about Kash Patel. I'm talking about Tulsi Gabbard. I'm talking about Robert Kennedy, 3 of my absolute favorites. But we know there's going to be some debate. So we had to get to it. I don't even think some of their hearings have been scheduled, which is insane to me. We need these people. We need Kash in there to take over the FBI. I couldn't be more excited about Robert Kennedy for Health and Human Services. And we got to get these people going and moving. And if we're not even hearing them get to testify, then how are we going to get them through? And it's all because people are holding up the process. And I don't want to see the works gummed up. They tried this to stall last time, and I'm hoping it doesn't work.
Just the idea, by the way, of hearing a debate in our congressional halls would be, that's extraordinary. I'd love to hear a debate in there instead of a bunch of it's just weird delusional accusations and sort of, strange what has happened to the legislative process. What about what do you make of President Biden's pardons for his entire family, essentially? All the people, essentially everybody that has a bank account, one of those special bank accounts that's getting money distributed to from various sources that are, of course, legitimate.
Yeah, I think part of what we're going to find that from Biden's negotiation to step down, there's definitely going to be some kickbacks that are going to come his way, either via fellowships, university positions, nonprofit donations. So the Biden family be okay. He's smart enough to have negotiated that for them. I spent way longer researching Joe Biden than any human being should. I wrote a book about him called Breaking Biden. And in it, I learned a few things about him, that he was very fixated on the presidency. That was his number one goal. But he really cared a lot about legacy and his family. And the fact that he had to pass off his administration to Donald Trump means that he'll have no legacy other than that he was the guy who kept Donald Trump's seat warm for 4 years, which is pretty remarkable and another great victory. But he looked out for his family. He was going to protect them. He loves them, cares about them deeply, and he is the caretaker, the patriarch. So they're going to be set up, and that's what this was. This is absolutely a criminal enterprise. I knew for a fact he was going to pardon all of them. Anytime you dig into them, then you know that all they had done is made money off of Joe Biden's name and shopping it around the world. And notice the date of the pardons. They start January 1st, 2014. That was right before the Biden family cut deals with Chinese companies, a Russian company, and a Ukrainian company. All of these are clearly, there's criminality to it, FARA violations. Hunter's art grift, where clearly that was set up specifically so he could get money from foreign countries, foreign governments to kick back money to the Biden family in exchange for favors. And we're never going to know the full truth of it, but it was pretty apparent to me that's what was being set up. And the fact that the pardons extend before all those deals makes it crystal clear this is the crime family we all said it was.
I worry about Hunter's ability to survive all this. You give somebody with the magnitude of addiction that he had, give him a ton of money, and there's a phrase in addiction treatment called, we say you love someone to death, which is what happens all the time with when family members rescue, enable, sort of do exactly what Joe Biden is doing with Hunter. And they die. Those people die. I've been fearful of his ability to survive all this for some time. And now that he's out of the, sort of the spotlight, now it can all come caving in. And I see no evidence of any real treatment. Maybe he has had something, but I don't see any evidence of it. He certainly doesn't speak like someone or behave like somebody who's been in that kind of care.
I've always said that Hunter's the most compelling Democrat because I think he is incredibly smart. And part of my fascination with him is that I can't believe he's alive. The extent to which he has been addicted and the legendariness of some of the benders he went on for such extended periods of time, seemingly with unlimited amounts of cash and connections and ability to get what he wants and when he wants it. Are you surprised he's alive? Because frankly, I'm sort of shocked.
I'm surprised. I've seen addicts go through a lot, and he looks more to me like somebody who, if he had not come to surface, if it had not come to light, or he had not had some motivation to stop, he would have died for sure. But he still looks to me like somebody who will die of this disease. And when you keep hearing these arguments, these discussions about how Joe Biden just loves his son, He's going to pardon his son because he loves him. No, if he loved his son, he would hold that man accountable and make him go to treatment and create consequences for the things that will kill him, and not give him access to too much money, because if somebody doesn't have a lot of sobriety under their belt, that's the worst thing you can possibly give them.
And he's a very clever guy, so he's going to figure out. Yeah,
I'm going to say, how to get money. Not only is he a very clever guy, I hear he's a nice guy, which doesn't surprise me. I hear he's a great guy when he's not using. When he's using, he becomes sort of an asshole. But that's also very common.
It doesn't shock me at all. I'd love to have a meal with him, but definitely I wouldn't do a rail with him. I'll tell you that.
No, I wouldn't advise you do that. You could be participating in his demise. It would not be a great thing. You called the Deep Safe the consultancy class. Is that did I get that correct?
Yeah.
What is that?
So here's what's going on. What happens. This is one of the things that disappointed me the most when I got to Washington, because I've been a Republican my whole life. It's sort of reluctant. I've never had deep respect for the Republican Party, but I've always hated the left. And it's always kind of guided me. And I always thought the best way to fight the left was via the Republican Party. But one of the things growing up in California, going to Berkeley, et cetera, I'd always been lectured to about the military industrial complex and how really we go into all these wars so that all these defense contractors can make money. And I thought there's no way we're that immoral that we send working class men and women to die overseas in pointless wars in order for people to get rich. And then I got to Washington and I realized that's exactly what's happening. And the reason why is because there's a banality to it, that we have these policies, we justify that we want to have robust policies, we want to have a lot of weaponry, we want to have a lot of material. And if we don't ever use them, then we don't need any more, and that dries up the business. And you don't end up, if you've access to lots of government money, you don't end up voting against your own interests. And if your interests are financial and your family's interests are financial, you end up coming up with excuses to keep building up that military industrial complex. And I was kind of shocked that this is real. But then you see stuff like Lloyd Austin, who was our past defense secretary, came literally from the board of Raytheon, one of our biggest government contractors. Tony Blinken, when he leaves from as Secretary of State, he has a business called West Exec. It's a consultancy. It's essentially a go-between between government money and the defense sector, where he gets government money and he comes up with contracts with big companies to do our defense work. And this is partially why we're in so many wars, is because there's so many people who are wetting their beak on these wars. It's very dark, but it's very real. And it's not just the defense industry. There's all of these law firms, high-end law firms. A lot of them, they want to keep people tied up in legal battles because that's how they pay their bills. There's all these various versions of this. And it is this network of consultants that liaison between the mega rich private sector and all of that government wealth. It's a revolving door. And it's exactly what Trump is talking about when we're talking about draining the swamp.
Is he going to be able to do it?
Hard to say. It starts with personnel. I think all these outsiders who think from an outsider's perspective, step number one is getting the right cabinet. And when you get people like Bobby Kennedy, you get a Pete Hegseth, you get a Tulsi Gabbard, you get these types of people who resent the way business is done in Washington and what I would assume be nodding along at stuff I'm saying right now. Whether or not we disagree on other stuff is irrelevant. I think they would get that fundamental point, is that this sort of public-private partnership is what's gotten so far out of hand, that they would start evaluating everything. And eventually, if they do that, I think they're going to end up finding a lot of places to cut and a lot of places that are only in place as wealth generation networks and not really designed to use the American government to try to make things better for the American citizens.
You mentioned this overdone public-private entanglement, which is really what fascism was at its core, right?
Certainly, absolutely.
And I'm wondering if this is not a right-left impulse that we're heading into, but this is a libertarian impulse, and that this overly centralized, it's too much centralized authority. To me, that's the enemy, and I don't think of that as a right or a left thing, though left seems enthusiastic about it. Is that an accurate way of thinking about things?
It very well could be. I don't think of it as on the right-left dichotomy, which is why some of these, Robert Kennedy, for example, who is a Democrat, might be the most exciting pick. For me, a lifelong Republican, because I know that he's actually going to use a scientific method. He's going to come in and say, is there actual facts that back up these assertions, or are we just going to go with the flow? We're not going to go with the flow. We're going to, well, where's the science? That's what we're going to do. That's going to be our policy. That's all I want. I don't need to agree with him on everything. I just want to feel like it's evidence-based. We've gotten away from evidence-based. Can we do evidence-based? That sounds good to me. Yeah.
I feel like, well, it's worse than just evidence-based. It's adultery. There is evidence bases to some of the things that are pushed forward. It's that anything that there's the back and forth of usual medical research of, this is good, it's not so good, we reach a consensus. It only goes one direction. And the one direction is the thing that's the problem. The evidence only goes one way, and the other stuff is buried somehow.
There are these currents that flow in Washington, and it takes a lot of willpower to say, no, we're going to push the current the other direction. Trump's been the best at this in my lifetime, and him drafting mini Trumps to put in his cabinet is the only way forward. It's the only chance we've got, because a lot of the currents are going in the wrong direction. I think about what animates me as a person, what I get excited about in the news, what I think a lot of people get excited about, because I think this has helped Breitbart be strong, is that I'm most interested in very strong individuals who are changing the world, who are going against the grain, who are distinguishing themselves, doing things that are unique. I'm sure this resonates with you, Dr. Drew. No one said your career path. I mean, it's one of these things where at every turn, you feel like you're doing something, you're almost like a mini pioneer at all times. I love that. The next thing most important to me is families, strong families. The left comes from the other perspective. They go macro. We want to have a world government. We want to have the World Health Organization. And then we want to have a big, strong state, a super state. We want to delegate as much power as we can to the federal government. And only then do we go to the state government. And then finally we go to the city government. And the last thing on your mind is the family and the individual. And I just work completely opposite from that. And anyone who wants to build up a strong individual, strong family, that's where good governance starts, in my view.
I completely agree with you. And it's sort of, again, I was talking to my previous guest about this very issue. Doesn't anybody study history? Is nobody aware of what happens when you with centralized authority? It's over and over and over and over again throughout human history. It's not. It does never goes well. It's never good for the people. But what does concern me, there is so much disdain for people, the average citizen. It seems like in the eyes of the elite that they are. And use the word contempt, I believe. It's contemptuous. It's disdainful, and they know better. That is a horrific posture. Horrific.
Yeah, and I'm much harder to control from my home office with a small to medium-sized team than a big conglomerate that's owned by some sort of multinational, a conglomerate with theme parks in China. And that's the whole thing of why our corporate news has gone so bad, is that ABC is ABC Disney and NBC is NBC Comcast Universal. They can't be trusted. CNN, Time Warner. These are multinational conglomerates who are trying to protect the interests of their shareholders. And I understand it. I'm not even trying to cast judgment. I do cast judgment, but that's not the point. The point is just to describe it as what it is. The extreme alternative to that is citizen journalists popping up on the X platform who are breaking stories who you can't really complain to them if they got the facts, because what are you going to take from them? They're just online with their laptops and their thumb typing on their phones. That's where real journalism is taking place right now.
What do you, I sort of want to wrap up with this, but where are the landmines going forward? What do you worry is going to get in the way of the progress that you believe you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We can't succumb to the same groupthink that the left did on the right, and I do see some litmus tests and purity tests that go on the right. And Dr. Drew, I don't think of you necessarily as a person of the right, but I feel like you agree with us a lot more these days. And so, welcome.
Thank you. I'm against the excesses. I'm common sense. I'm against delusionality. I'm against excesses. And I worry when I look at the enthusiasm coming on the right that euphoria is going to create excesses. Yes. And that concerns me.
And it should concern you. And that's what we got to keep an eye on that. And I want to make sure that what we're doing is because we've identified something that's wrong, that we also act like sometimes we've immediately identified the alternative. And I see this a lot when we identify that, the COVID vax was oversold. A lot of the alternatives that are been presented out there aren't really rooted in anything substantial. They're just whatever got caught online that weekend. We can't do that, because we're going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah. You're doing the same thing they're doing then. It's just a different story. Yeah. That's all. Yeah, I agree with you. That to me, that concerns me more than anything, is this sort of the excesses that are showing up here and there. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Where can they get the Alex Marlow Show?
Yeah, wherever you get your podcasts. So YouTube, Rumble, iTunes, Spotify, Breitbart.com is a great place to go for all the news. AlexMarlow.com, if you forget all that, you can find me on there. And Dr. Drew, this is a blast. You've helped so many people over the years. And I'm a long-time Adam and Dr. Drew Show listener, Loveline listener. So this has been really cool. And I didn't want to fangirl at the beginning of the interview, but this has been a really exciting for me.
I appreciate you being here. Hope you'll come back, and I hope we meet in person.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Okay, interesting show today. A lot of new kinds of stuff. I'm watching you guys on the rants. I've been in the Restream a bit. I think you guys are sort of on board with these Tom cigars. Thank you for that. But now it's going sideways all of a sudden. So as soon as I jumped in there, the trolls jumped in with me. Show me what's coming up, Caleb. Bitcoin talk, a lot of stuff in there. There we go. Salty cracker. Is that tomorrow? No, that's
23rd.
Thursday rather. Is there nothing? I think we have something for tomorrow, don't we? Hold on.
Tomorrow, I believe, the only thing on that calendar is tomorrow we have a calling out show Susan is doing. If that's still happening, I believe that's still happening tomorrow evening.
Okay. I think that's true. I'm going to be on Newsmax this evening at 5:40. So Salty Cracker Mix is great comeback. And then, poor Emily Barsh has been begging us for clarity on our schedule, because we've been in complete standstill because of the fires and this baby. So that is my son there. That is my granddaughter. And that came on Sunday. And so we're pretty excited about that. And then now we've got a different schedule problem where we're always running down to Irvine to visit the baby. But at least we can plan now. Before we were like, we don't know what to expect. We don't know what's coming. And she took a minute to get into the world. So, but everything's great. McCullough's coming in on the 30th, Mike Young on the 5th. Beatrice Rosen is a French and English and American actress. And I heard her on a French radio program, and she is outspoken. I thought, oh, interesting. She can bring both that French and American perspective on some of the excesses. They have this, they say constantly, and she was asking this, qu'est-ce qui se passe avec les wokeism? They have the wokeism, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Like they're confused about the woke ideas and how it's completely taken over in France from here, of course, and they don't even know where it came from. And they don't even quite understand what the history of all this stuff is. So there we are. We appreciate you being here. Been an interesting day today. Let me make one last look into the restream. Thank you guys. And the rant, giving us congratulations on the baby. Thank you so much for that. It's an odd thing being a grandparent, Caleb. A parent, getting used to being a dad was enough of an adjustment. Now the final phase sets in. But I know you love babies, so.
Yeah, my babies. I don't know if I said this on the show or before, but it snowed for the first time ever in our area. And so I was running around to get to the show because I had to take a little 30-minute break in the middle of the day, go outside and have my baby see their first snow ever. The little one did not like it.
Get out there again. Maybe a little,
like in our faces,
soften up
and like
a little bit.
She's 1 year old, and she just like sat there and screamed after bring her inside back to the warm. She sits there and yells at us for 30 minutes. Just so mad, just letting us know.
You got to do it on their terms. That's the whole deal.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody.
The other one loved it.
So I'll be back. So Susan is in at 3 tomorrow for her calling out show. I will be in with Salty Cracker at noon on Thursday, a special time because of his show. So noon on Thursday. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.